Hello.
All right, are we live streaming? I don't think we're live streaming yet.
Oh, we're
If
not.
you're joining the call, welcome. Hi, Chad. We're just
Hey,
waiting to
Chad.
get started with our live stream.
Here we go.
Here we go. All
Live
right, we are
streaming.
live streaming.
Welcome. Yay, look at all the
Oh, here
people
you all
coming in.
come. Look at you all.
Oh, this is great. As you're
So
saying hi, if you'd also want to include where you're calling in from today so we can get a sense of where our community is from, that'd be great. Chicago, Canada, Amsterdam, Baker. Oh my God.
I saw Peru. Holy smokes. There are going to be
Minnesota,
500 people.
Delaware, London, Geneva, St. Louis, Texas, Portland, Israel, Seattle,
Turkey, Southampton, Saskatchewan, Doha. I can't keep up. Well, welcome.
Wow. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
We're so happy to be here and in this conversation. We're just going to take a few minutes to get here and gather in community and get present before we get started. Thank you all for saying hi and sharing where you're from.
Welcome Carey. To everybody who's watching the live stream too, who won't be able to get a spot in the webinar, but will have a chance to participate from a distance. Everyone will be getting some materials and follow-up. So yeah, we appreciate you spending your time with us. We know you have lots of choices and we're really excited to get into this conversation together.
Yeah.
New Zealand, Casper, wow.
Carlo, you got a personal shout out from Jennifer Campbell, who's on the call.
Hello, Jen Campbell. Welcome. I saw Barb too. Hi, Barb.
Oh, nice. Hi, Barb. Okay, well, also, and hi to the people who are going to be watching this sometime later in the day when you get the recording. We're glad you're watching it at any time that's convenient for you. Let's introduce ourselves. We imagine we know there's people on the call that we know who are shouting out to us, and there's some people who don't know who we are or who CTI is and are showing up for the first time, and maybe some people in between. So I'm Carey Baker.
I'm Carlo Boss.
And we're the co-CEOs at the Coactive Training Institute. And we also are faculty at CTI. We deliver our coursework and our curriculum. Mm-hmm. And we are
Carey and I.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Carey and I came in as the co-presidents initially and co-CEOs, taking over from the founders of CTI 5 years ago. So we've been on this journey of trying to continue to steward the philosophy and evolution of Coactive, the technology that we train in the world, with a business designed to meet the current world that we're experiencing all the time. So we're 5 years into the role, first time CEOs every day, and the topic that we're getting into today is very current and real for us in our experiences personally and professionally.
Yeah, and we imagine you're showing up for some similar interests around the desire to be in a coactive personal development conversation and how to marry that up with business dynamics and present current day circumstances. So let's set the landscape a little bit for what we're going to talk about today. Actually, let's talk a little bit about some of the logistics. So we're in a webinar format, obviously, which is a little bit unusual for CTI, where we usually engage in much more intimate experiences, and we're excited to be in this format. How we'll be primarily engaging with you is through the chat and through the Q&A. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A part of the webinar feature, and any other chatter that wants to happen, please engage in the chat. Both places are great places to engage.
We have 4 team members that are also supporting us, who you'll see pop up in the chat and Q&A. We have Susan Acker, we have Rebecca Eastwood, we have Sharon Jacobson, and we have Clarissa Frank. So you'll see them show up in those places. They'll be supporting us all in answering some of the questions and helping us respond as we go. So keep an eye out for them and for their support along the way.
We'll be sharing some slides and mostly just talking to you, because that's the format of a webinar, and doing our best to feeling into all of the questions, curiosities, and the field around us. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to talk about. This re-engage campaign. But we want to talk a little bit about the current landscape of leadership and what we feel we're all as leaders facing these days.
A number of you are pointing out in the chat that that's one of the reasons why you came, is in your leadership development conversations, the topic that we've raised is coming up. And we hear that too. So hence why we wanted to talk about this topic.
Yeah. We're going to talk about how skill building is great, but it's not quite enough to actually navigate as an effective leader these days. And how there's a common experience that we think most leaders are facing called fear. We're going to talk a little bit about fear on this call. And then
we're going to talk a little bit about a doorway that we offer, which is around relationship and self-awareness as a way of navigating the landscape, the experience, and what Carey just said, that dimension of the experience being fear. So how does self-awareness, which will be familiar, we imagine, to many of you, how is that a doorway to actually continue to create and lead, to engage in these times?
Yeah, I see some disappointment in the chat from some people that there won't be any breakouts, which is a typical thing for C-Type. But we will be doing an experience or a walkthrough of a practice that you can do on your own, and then we'll engage with each other in the chat around that.
Yeah. Okay,
so here we go. The current landscape of leadership. Well, let's just say we're all encountering a lot of firsts these days. I think none of us imagined we'd be leading all ourselves, our families, our organizations through a pandemic that we have and still currently do, or the environmental breakdown that we're facing, political and social upheaval. We're facing lots of firsts. Yeah.
A reference has been around for many years, but certainly feels more true than not lately, is the acronym of VUCA, a volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. And that as coaches and leaders, we're engaging ourselves and engaging with our clients and our organizations and our teams in that kind of world at a rate of pace that only seems to be accelerating and infusing all of the different domains of life, as Carey said, political, social, economic, health, in ways that are unpredictable, surprising, and desire our attention.
Yeah, well, and the stakes are really high, and our attention's being pulled in lots of different directions simultaneously. And we think, we're facing our systems and institutions' inability to stand the test of time and the actual current circumstances. And so there's a lot of change wanting to happen. Lots and lots of change wanting to come through. So that's the landscape. I'm sure some of you can relate to that in some shape or form. And there's a lot of talk about overwhelm, how all of that can create a lot of overwhelm or intensity or uncertainty. And it's actually not this, we're asserting that it's not the stuff that's the problem, it's actually how we relate to it. And so we want to talk a little bit about how we relate to all of this and where leaders should be putting their energy and attention.
One of the experiences we're finding in ourselves and we're hearing regularly across our customers and our faculty is an experience of an emotion that many people are feeling, but no one's really willing to talk about. In particular, we would say in organizational workplaces. And that experience that people are in that no one's talking about is fear.
Fear. Hey, Clarissa, can we please advance the slide? Yeah, so this thing that no one's talking about is fear. There's a lot of...
Hey, Carey, just one sec. Rose asked a good question, just a big slide, small people. If folks go over to the right side, if that's your experience, just by us, Carey and I being small, you'll see an opportunity to slide the slide smaller and make Carey and I bigger. That would be my pro tip for doing that and the extent of my technical thing. So yes, that's great. So you can be fearful that you can't see the people in this exercise. So let's abate that fear.
Yeah. So, well, let's just be honest. I can speak for myself. We had, in our getting here with our tech team, we talked about all the things we were afraid of today happening, the tech challenges and the messaging not going wrong. And as a leader, Carlo and I are we face fears every day, everything from, will I be able to respond to my child's meltdown and give her what she needs, to will we be able to make the right decisions for our budget and planning process next year? So if it's getting it right, if it's maintaining relationships, if it's being of service, we all have some underlying fear when we face firsts and high risk circumstances. This is a normal and appropriate response to the level of complexity we're facing today.
We also assert that probably one of the reasons you came, on top of experiencing this in and where you work and live, is that you're also attuned to the experience of emotions you and others are having. And it's really obvious this is something people are encountering. So how do we not just step over it or try to brush it aside or put it under the rug? How do we actually acknowledge it in a space and way that has people include it and then work with it? Because there are a lot of systems or beliefs or conditions, there's conditioning that I know has been, Carey and I have talked about this, has been infused on us as leaders around, do you talk about fear? How do you keep these emotions in check? How do you manage them in such a way that it doesn't create a cacophony, a lot of disruption in an environment, and instead just get on with it? That's conditioning that's affecting us all at some level.
Yeah. A basic way of talking about this is to say that Carlo does a great, the author of Emotions at Work, The Power of Emotions at Work, talks a lot about how we've bucketed a bunch of emotions like fear, anger into negative emotions, and that those are problematic, especially at work. And what I love about how she flips the script on this is she said that negative emotions are actually problem-solving emotions. They're cueing us to information. They're giving us an experience and cueing us into information we need. So what she says about fear is it's a really powerful, intuitive response to external circumstances, that something needs to change, or we need to adapt, or that we're approaching potentially a harmful situation that we need to be aware of so that we can create it, shape it, and lead through it. So it's actually not the emotions that are the problem, it's how we're relating to our emotions that are a problem. When we make them negative, when our systems that we're a part of say that they shouldn't be included, they're not appropriate, then we cut ourselves off from a huge resource of creative energy.
I want to acknowledge what Hetty added in the chat, and others are now commenting on, is if you're living in an identity that's historically oppressed and marginalized, this experience of fear, and VUCA, Hetty referenced as well, has been sort of the normal operating system.
Yes.
Probably for your whole life experience. So we do want to certainly welcome and include, account for this idea of our own lived experiences and our identities have this engage with this topic of fear uniquely. And from Carey's and my identities, we represent a different orientation to dominant culture and how we're served or not served by that. And so include, appreciate, and know that we continue to have a lot to learn about how that's accounted for. Thank you for reading.
Yeah, thank you for raising it. We're going to talk a little bit about that towards the end of our talk, and since it's coming through now, I think it's worth sharing that a lot of dominant cultures and systems, depending on where you live, want to suppress these kinds of negative emotions because if we had to be with them, then we would realize that things need to change. So it is part of the systemic oppression to keep us away from these experiences. So in a way, what we're saying is if we can create a culture that can include them, even if it's that culture inside self or in our family systems or that into our organizations, we're going to start to actually create systemic change together because it's going to clue us into what's not working. And we're going to have to face it. So just want to also bring that in, which is this is why they're labeled as negative emotions, so that we don't touch them and that we don't disrupt the status quo. So in a way, we're inviting us into a change maker conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, so fear, it's a normal response to this VUCA world. it's can be classified as a negative emotion, but we're actually asserting in alignment with Carlo McLaren that it's actually a problem-solving emotion. It's tuning us in and cluing us into stuff. And we want to touch into another piece of research that the Harvard Business Review did during the pandemic, where they worked with a series of leaders in the United States and in the United Kingdom and tracked journal entries that they asked them to take over this period of time around their experience. And they identified 3 types of leaders who were engaging through the pandemic and trying to lead through the pandemic. The first type of leader they identified were heroes. These are leaders who really focused on the positive outcomes and that everyone was going to make it no matter what, and everything was going to be okay. And then they identified technocrats. These are the people who ignored all emotions and just really stuck to tactical solutions.
The third group of leaders they identified were what they called sharers. And these are leaders who openly acknowledge their fears, their stresses, and other negative emotions, and included them as places to engage and initiate discussion, alignment, openness, awareness for the purposes of problem solving, and creating community, frankly, which has been needed more often than not over these last couple of years. And probably not surprising if this feels like a setup, kind of is. Guess which group was most effective in generating cohesive, performing, resilient teams? The sharers. Because it was territory that they were wading into with their teams that historically had not been at a systems level, meaning normalized across business culture, community culture, including this idea of sharing these negative emotions or these experiences in a way in which it would serve the people and the business moving forward. So sharers were the most successful in the study at building cohesive and resilient teams.
So how do we become sharers? How do we become individuals who can be with, express, and include our emotions? How do we become organizations that can do that, cultures, a world that can actually include all of our emotions? And we're not saying that nobody does this, or that there aren't cultures that don't account for these kinds of things, but we think it's a predominant challenge and problem that most leaders are facing cross-culturally.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we do it? Well, for decades, leaders have been investing in building competencies, technical skills, subject matter expertise, and
extra knowledge,
yes. Yeah.
practices, processes that they can use in their life and work.
These are great. We need these. These are really great, but we're asserting that that's not enough for today's world and the size of problems we're facing. So skill building isn't enough. What we do need are more sophisticated and complex ways of thinking. We need ability to gain greater insights and new perspectives. And we need to be adaptive to our new environments and experiences. So we need what we're calling horizontal development. Can we get the second animation to the slide going, please? So competencies, which we talked about, horizontal development, skills, abilities, knowledge, process, are great.
The response to development and applying those skills and abilities and knowledge with more flexibility and agility is vertical development, which we're referring to as capacity. So it's my capacity to apply all that I've learned and known in different scenarios with a high degree of both self and other awareness, which we'll get to. So in capacity, we talk about will, our will to continue to get up and learn and do hard things in developing ourselves in the face of circumstances. Agility, as we mentioned, and that different than knowledge, what's at the core of this is this idea of a larger intelligence I gain through body, heart, and mind, and activating instinct. My instinct to respond, to engage, and to trust the unfolding as opposed to only trust in a process. Those are parts of capacity. I love what you were saying, Carey, too, just about this idea of we're wanting to support this idea of skills and competency development still being really important in this time. This isn't an either or scenario. But where most leaders we feel are being tested is not in those domains.
Yeah.
We feel where they're being tested more often than not is in the dimensions of vertical development or capacity.
Well, and if our world is increasing in its complexity, we need to have more sophisticated way of engaging with it. So one line of development isn't sophisticated enough. We need to balance it out with both. So to that point, it's like, okay, well, the bottom line really of this is we can't solve a vertical problem with a horizontal solution. So we really need to look at how we bring wholeness to our development, keep honing and refining our skills, keep bringing and including our knowledge, and really going deep with who are we, why are we here, what do we have to bring, how do I build my capacity to face these situations and sustainably.
Yeah. There aren't official tweetables in this presentation, but if there is one, that is one to consider, because it is a distinction, and a number of folks are mentioning in the chat some of the obstacles that they face in leadership. This is one of the ways we're wanting to challenge the systems, leadership or organizational systems. They want to train their people to be more effective at applying process or working in particular dimensions. That's great, but it's not scalable because it's the leader themselves that needs to be developing their own degrees of awareness and capacity, which we're going to get into and use the lens of fear through which to do it.
Yeah.
So Carey pointed out, so we can't solve a vertical challenge with a horizontal solution. So what is our perspective, our response to engaging in this world that's invoking fear? How do we do it?
We assert it's through relationship. It's one of the major crises we are facing in our world is a relationship crisis. Yes, we're experiencing environmental breakdown and social upheaval and economic downturn. We assert that the root of that is a relationship crisis. And in Coactive, we say there's 3 leader relationships. The first relationship is relationship to self. Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my cause? What's important to me?
What are all the parts of me? How am I in relationship to those parts? The parts I love about myself, the parts I don't like to talk about. That we as selves are systems. And so how am I in relationship to all those facets?
What's my identity and my lived experience? And how is that relative to me and my world? What are the experiences it's created for me? Okay, so that is self. And the second relationship is relationship to other.
So relationship to, between two people, often bilateral. And this idea I noticed in the chat, the ORSC work, the CRR work on team and systems coaching came up. It's how are we in relationship and creating that relationship as a conscious construct between two people that we're both contributing to. So the quality of that relationship, the design of that relationship, and how I take responsibility for it in my own way. So that's other.
Yep. And then relationship to the larger systems we're a part of. So this is a group of many people. This could be your family system. This could be your organization you work for. This could be a school community you belong to or educational community you belong to. It could be a religious affiliation, a system of religion that you belong to or associate with. These are all the systems that we engage with or are part of. Political systems that we find ourselves in. So relationship to self, other, and the system are the three leader relationships we feel leaders need to be paying attention to and creating from, to be responsible to the world and the circumstances we're facing.
So under themselves, these are three big topics. You know, what is my relationship to self? What is my relationship to other? What is my relationship to systems? Where we're going to put our attention today and where we assert is the starting point for all of this is the relationship to self.
That's right.
Because it is the self that engages with those other dimensions of relationship, those other aspects. And there are two foundational qualities in some of our training, what we talk about in terms of the relationships to self. There are two foundational qualities that we have people really get in touch with. The first is self-acceptance. And this idea that I am a multifaceted human being and leader. I have many aspects of myself, and that I am in a dialogue and quality of relationship. And my degree, my ability to be accepting of those aspects of myself, account and include them, will really frame my ability to engage with, accept, account for different facets of others or systems as I engage. So self-acceptance in and of itself, it's a lot of selves. In and of itself is a breakthrough body of work to keep working through over time.
And from self-acceptance, we can then author our world. That's what we mean by self-authority. We actually can feel empowered to and have a lot of intention around how we want to author our story, our world, our experiences, and gain a lot more empowerment around choice.
Yeah.
So the relationship to self, rooted in self-acceptance and self-authority, does not mean that you have it all figured out before you go, that you become a perfect person. And it really just means that you become devoted to the lifelong exploration and understanding and intimacy with self over time. And from that place, intentionally shape and author and are created by your world.
Yeah, I appreciate what you shared, Vicki, just in terms of maybe some of the essential energies that go in self-acceptance and self-authority. Masculine or feminine, one of the ways that we also talk about it, one is sort of a more holding energy, which is self-acceptance. How do I hold myself in relationship to my life and who I'm becoming in the world? And self-authority is where am I activating the self? More of a pointed, a directional energy. So you can imagine, you know, being a container for yourself for the exploration Carey was talking about, to continue to explore and develop and nurture that, and then to point it, take it somewhere, to engage with the world. That's the dance of the relationship to self.
Yeah. So we're gonna go a little bit deeper on the relationship to self today, because it activates and informs all the other leader relationships we've talked about. And it's the one that we're creating from in every moment, all the time. And in our coactive leadership model, it is the starting point. It is the choice point that unlocks more dimensions of leadership. So it's a real powerful portal into a grounding posture for your leadership in a world that feels unstable and chaotic.
Yeah, and if there was one thing that I would long for our world at this stage, would be that we make space. Some of you in the chat are talking about what we prioritize and don't prioritize in cultures, is that we prioritize some time every day to get in touch with this quality of relationship to self, because it is the quality of relationship that gets created, you know, as we move out and through in the world. So it is, as Carey said, at the heart of the model. Now, when we encounter things that scare us, that have us feel fearful, I know for me, even from some recent experiences, as Carey talked about, you know, budgeting, having businesses respond, wanting to be a better dad or husband in this process, as the complexity increases, I get more fearful at my ability to do that in a way that's in line with why I think I'm here. So So when fear comes up, what do we do with that? How do we engage with it and include it in a way that is aligned to self-acceptance and self-authority?
There's a comment in the chat, Vic Peters, making a really astute comment about how, fear can get us stuck in a place where we can only relate to ourselves. And I can so relate to that. And I think it's nuanced. So this is not this webinar, it will be another webinar probably, but why there's 3 leader relationships is because when we are, let's call it, stuck in ourselves, there are other places to recover to. It's time, that's a signal to, I need to recover to other, I need to recover to the larger system I'm a part of, or the larger unfolding, or maybe there's deeper work I need to do if I'm really actually stuck here in myself and unaware of my other relationships. The other thing about what you're mentioning is the relationship between the mind, which is a real beautiful resting place for the horizontal stuff, knowledge, wisdom, intellect, process. There needs to be self that is on the vertical line. So we really get stuck in fear when it's coming from our mind and we're not actually tapped into it on a deeper level. When we gain access and intelligence to our fear and where it lives in a deeper level in our system, it usually is an unlocking experience, an unstucking experience. And we're actually going to go into a practice in a moment that's going to hopefully support that kind of process, getting out of the head part of fear and more into an integrated part of fear and negative emotion.
So let's go check that out. Let's go check out. So it's not a breakout, but this is a practice that we're going to invite you all to engage in. And it's a practice around self-awareness and a current experience of fear. To get into the sense of relationship to self, we're going to garner a little bit of reflection, raise some awareness, and then see what comes up. So it's a self-reflective process. We're going to actually close the chat just for this process. It's going to be 10 minutes or so. And so we're going to invite you, if you're not already, to make yourself comfortable. It's, again, going to be reflection, inner awareness. And so to do so, along with making yourself comfortable, often what we find can help is to soften your gaze, or if you're comfortable, to close your eyes. Others may want to grab a pen and a piece of paper or a journal and write during this. So different ways that we reflect or find that helpful. Or there may be some other way that you find is best for you when you go into self-reflection. So just take a moment and get yourself set up for this.
Yeah. Gather your writing materials or get comfortable in your chair. And allow your mind actually to start letting go of all your thoughts and opinions and ideas about what's happening here and all the information it's gathering, and really allow yourself to start dropping into this moment. Give yourself this 10 minutes to be in a practice of self-reflection. And maybe become more aware of your body. If it's in a chair, the sensation of the chair meeting the parts of your body. If you're standing, your feet on the floor, maybe just feeling the air touching your skin. To start to become more aware of your sensory experience in this moment. It's helpful.
Bring yourself to presence, like just present in this moment.
Yeah. Breath is a really powerful friend in these experiences. So whether you have your eyes opened or closed, maybe take a few intentional inhales and exhales. And allow it to settle you more into your whole physical being. From the tip-top crown of your head to the heels of your feet, let the energy of your breath flow through your body. And as you're getting grounded in that breath, just being here in this moment, nothing to do, nothing to fix, nothing to know. Start to think of the circumstances in your life work that you are facing or navigating as a leader. It doesn't have, it could be something really specific. It could be really generalized. And it could be an image you're seeing. It could be thoughts you're having. It could just be a feeling. Just start to tap into the things that are going on around you that you are navigating and leading through. And as you do that, bring some awareness to what is actually around you. Who are the people that are around you or involved in these circumstances? Maybe feel into the nature of those relationships. What is the challenge that you're facing in these circumstances? What's challenging about it? What feelings do you notice in your body as you are calling in all the circumstances and experiences of your leadership these days around you? What do you notice? What do you become aware of in your body? What are the sensations as you imagine coming face to face with these challenges? Really allow it to amplify itself and just be with it. There's nothing to do with it, nothing to analyze. Just allow it to really become present, like an entity you're becoming face to face with. And as it becomes clearer, put yourself in the middle of it all. So you are in the center, and these circumstances, these challenges are all around you now. There are many things present here. People, opinions, needs, desires, nuances. Just pay attention to all of it around you, moving around you. Notice the nature of it and just be with it. There's, again, nothing to do here, nothing to change, to fix, to know. Just build the capacity to be with it. And then try to put a soft focus on the things around you and create a more hard focus on yourself. So really dim down the circumstance around you and put more of the focus on you in the middle of it all. Notice what's here for you. Maybe there are emotions or thoughts that are wanting to pass through, sensations or images that are appearing. Just allow yourself to become aware of what's going on inside of you as the circumstances unfold around you. And now, more specifically, try to locate in you, it could be, again, an image or a feeling, fear at any degree. try to zero in on a place where maybe you're feeling rigid or restricted. That's sometimes where fear will reside. Or maybe it's a place where you feel a little bit insecure or vulnerable or unstable. Just try to zero in on what may be the beginning of or the depth of fear in your experience. Maybe it's an anxiety or a point of intensity that's really hard to be with. And just keep focusing on that part. For some, sending some breath to that part to amplify it and to really bring more awareness to it will help. And just be with it. There's nothing to do again. No judgment, no opinions, no thoughts, no fixing, just being with whatever it is, whatever you've located. And pausing for a minute to be with it. However you're responding to this, whatever is happening in your experience right now is absolutely, totally okay and normal and fine. So just keep being with wherever you are at in this process. And as you focus on this part of you that is fear, or this experiencing that is fear, see if you can ask it some answers from a few questions. So as though it can speak to you, ask it, what part of who I am is important for me to bring to this experience, the circumstances around me? What part of me is important? What part of me needs to show up? And see what it has to say. And now inquire about any actions that might be needed. What actions might be needed in the face of these circumstances? And then see if there's any information about what this part, this feeling, fear, is protecting you from. What is it wanting you to watch out for? What is it wanting to keep you safe from? And then if it's possible, just take one last moment with this part of you to thank it for doing its job, for being present, for giving you any information or wisdom or intelligence that is useful to you. And begin to expand your focus to now include the circumstances around you. So allow yourself to stay grounded in yourself and your self-awareness, and start to sharpen the focus of all of the circumstances that you're navigating and leading around you. So it's all in focus. It all has more energy and aliveness to it. And then allow yourself, maybe with some breath if that's useful, or if you have your eyes closed, a small flutter of your eyelids or a movement of your body, just slowly coming back to this moment, to my voice to Carlo's voice. And if you had been turned away from the screen or have your eyes closed, try to find a spot other than the screen to focus on first before you come back. And then as you become more present to this moment, to where we are in our experience all together, trust that whatever you gained here is the beginning of something, or whatever you gained is wisdom that you'll remember. It's that it's locked in. And we're going to open the chat back up. And we want to hear from you if you're willing to share in the chat what was at the heart of this experience that mattered the most. What did you get that really mattered most to you? It could have been intelligence or wisdom from your fear or from your awareness, or it could have just been from the process. Oh, thanks, Jill. Love and letting go of the need to control. Yes. I can so get how in the face of complexity and intensity and uncertainty and fear, some of us have a habit of going to controlling things. So it's beautiful wisdom.
Also seeing some things just about just the decision or the opportunity to let go of having to control or remediate or understand or decide on a particular experience, and actually be in process with it just a little bit to see what new awareness may show up. This is a short vertical development exercise. That's what you were in and are in right now in terms of developing the intelligence and the instinct we spoke of.
That's great. Trond is saying he's going to have a meeting tomorrow that's now exciting. I assume that it wasn't exciting for this. It was going to be something else. That's great news too, that it's changing and evolving how you're going to engage or orient or hold a perspective about, choose to engage with things in your world. That's great.
And Barb just said too, to let go of scripting. And part of what we assert is that when you develop the capacity, vertical development capacity, to actually be really present in the face of intense experience, you might be the only one in the room. And what you will create from as a leader is a well of opportunity and truth that is otherwise going unspoken and would be courageous to bring in. And, you know, boy, Barb, am I ever developing that over years, but more and more we're finding and hearing that capacity matters a lot to working with clients and teams in this landscape.
Michelle was sharing that one of the things that she got was, I'm more than enough, which sounds like so simple and is so profound, especially when we live in systems that say fear or any emotion like it is a problem. That is a message that says you're not enough. If you're fearful, then you're not enough of something else. And actually, what a beautiful realization to get in touch with the fear that had the message inside of it, you are enough, you have everything you need. And what a beautiful example of a message of self-acceptance. Who I am right now as I am is totally enough to navigate what I'm facing. And it's so true. It's so true.
Between the chat's going fast, between what Lynn O'Neill shared and Nadia shared, the vertical development axis that we showed, it actually should have two arrows on it, one going up and one going down, because part of what we're discovering, and our friends at the Leadership Circle, Full Circle group, some of you may be familiar with the Leadership Circle profile. We engaged in some work with them where we talked about well, we need to develop and enhance, ascend our capacity to be with more complexity so that we can work at a higher order of awareness. We also need to be willing to descend into the more protected or fearful, challenging parts of ourselves. You can't just do the work one way. You've got to go both ways. To rise higher, you've got to be able to go deeper. And so, the exercise you just did was a depth exercise. Some of you talked about how you would rise from it. Some of you may still be in the depth of it. Both of those places are really important to learn to create from in yourself and in community and with others, like what we do in all of our coactive trainings. So yes, there is a protection. It's like, how do I create from this experience of being a human wanting to protect themselves? Because so many people, for good reason, are in a mode of protection, real or imaginary, but that's what's happening.
There's a bunch of comments too that either directly point to or are pointing to indirectly the relationship between the mind and the emotion and the rest of our being. And one of my favorite mantras is, I have a mind, I am not my mind. Like the remembering that my mind is such a useful and important asset to help me translate the larger experience, and that there's so many other systems of intelligence that I need my mind to help me understand or tap into. And I think, like Vic was saying, there's fear from my thoughts and fear from the unknown. And I think what happens is actually we fear the unknown, and then our mind manufactures a bunch of stuff, which is one thing to pay attention to. How can we drop into all the other deeper intelligence that we have around the unknown? What does your heart want to say? What does our gut want to say? How do we pause and actually include all those other things with our thoughts and use our mind to interpret it rather than to drive it? The place we can get stuck.
Well, we're going to talk actually a bit about the mind further now, because part of what we hold is that self-awareness is a gateway to cultivating this relationship with what we call our leader within, our inner leader, the part of us that we are nurturing through self-acceptance and self-authority, and that we call on daily in moments of critical leadership. And there are of course lots of practices. Some of you are referencing them in the chat to help to cultivate this. For many years, neuroscience has been talking about mind or cognitive capabilities that are really helpful for leaders to develop to engage with the complex world. And the studies, the articles have commonly pointed to three qualities. The first is the capacity to develop vision. It's really important people have the capacity to develop vision for themselves, for their communities, for their world. So that's one. How do we nurture and develop the capacity for vision? How do we develop the capacity for cognitive flexibility? Earlier, some of you were putting in the chat this notion of taking different perspectives. How do I see a circumstance and not only one truth, one way to solve it as being the only option? How am I able to assess a situation, be in myself, and see multiple angles, multiple ways forward, and choose as a result of that flexibility? And the third thing they say is the capacity for mindfulness and presence. And again, in the chat, I think it was Barb just talked about the importance of being really mindful and present in the sea of wanting to script and prepare and respond and not listen. That mindfulness practice is central. So that's what neuroscience says: vision, cognitive flexibility, and mindfulness. And we point to those being fundamental building blocks of self-awareness.
Yeah, and we essentially just have different words for them and slightly nuanced meaning to them. So for us, the building blocks for your inner leader, for this self-awareness, the first one is purpose. Who am I? Why am I here? What's important to me? What are my values? What are my intentions? What am I at cause for? that what is my vision for the world? This is where it's born from, the purpose I'm here for. So first is purpose.
Second is power. The concept of power, a number of you are talking or referring to DEI work, and that's intercultural work, which has come up. In this case, the way that we hold power is, how do I activate power in me to choose in the midst of my circumstances, acknowledging that not all of us have the same choices all the time because of our identities and the cultures that we work in. But secondarily, it's the power and the ability to see different perspectives and then to choose and to feel empowered to do so.
Someone even shared in the chat after the awareness practice that letting go was a choice. Letting go is actually a powerful choice that they could make instead of holding on. So that's one example. Okay, the third thing is presence. And a lot of us understand presence through lots of different practices, being in the moment, staying in the present moment. Our nuance around this is, what can I be with and what can't I be with, and how do I build my capacity to be with more? This is a really critical capacity building need for leaders these days, which is not just how can I sit on my mat and breathe and stay focused, but actually how can I build my capacity to be with more? If I can't be with my own fear, how can I be with the fear on my team? And if I can't be with the fear of my team at work, how do I actually meet them where they are and lead them somewhere else? And so presence is as much about the meditative state of being and the not missing the present moment and tracking where we are as it is building our capacity to be with more, because then we can create from more. So
for those of you who have young ones at home or elders at home, these past couple of years have been challenging in many different respects. So it's at work with our teams, at home with the other important people in our lives. This capacity to return to presence more and more cultivates relationships that we feel are aligned with the first two, purpose and power. So we're including all of those things because as leaders, not only do you have those things going on in your lives, but so do your colleagues and team members and bosses. They have all of those complexities. We were on a pretty contentious call yesterday with partners of ours, and what came through as a part of that conversation was some serious personal circumstances that one of our partners was facing that I wasn't clued into. And while it didn't solve for the big challenge we're wrestling with right now, it did invoke more empathy and a call for me to get back to being present with who and what's here now, not the fear about all that might happen or not happen. So just an example of how all those worlds are more and more intertwined. And as leaders, we've got to be able to access that quality of presence in order to create from what's there, because it was there. Yeah. So do I create from it? Do I reject it? What do I do?
Yeah. I really appreciate your comment, Teal, around the vulnerability, first of all, and the willingness to share how you fear your emotions and how you're on a journey to actually accept them. This is not, and what we're suggesting is not an easy task. And I commend you for actually engaging with yourself around this and being on the exploration of how can you be more, because we believe that actually you will then be able to be with more in your life and others going through those experiences. As Carlo mentioned, they became creative opportunities. And Dennis, really appreciate what you're saying about how these map to our model. Close. It's purpose is definitely related to fulfillment. These three things are what we say are at the center of the human being. And they do map to some of our curriculum work around essential to our philosophies, that we believe all humans want to live a life on purpose, aligned to their values, with a clear vision, that they want to be empowered to make choices in their lives and to be flexible in their mindset, and that they don't want to miss life. They want to be able to have some element of presence. And so you're right, Dennis, this is very much mapped to our core philosophy and coactive model around what we believe human beings really want in their lived experience.
And what leaders can again develop in their own capacity, and then those of the people around them to engage with this complex VUCA world that we talked about. More and more relevant and important given the nature and speed of the complexity of things.
Yeah. Now, so there's a thing that we want to talk about. The real thing that the reason that we think we're here is at the beginning of the call, we mentioned, you know, we're all leaders. We're all facing some big challenges in really significant themes in our world. And we assert that you're all here because you want to be at cause around those things. You want to affect change, that you are a change maker. That's why you're actually called to these conversations. It's why you invest in and give time to your development, whether that's on the horizontal or vertical plane. You want to be used in this life to create change. And we know that one of the things that gets in the way of us engaging in change is fear. That fear will stop most of us from taking action. And so unless we transform the way we relate to our fear, we can't create the change we want to create. We can't realize it.
Yeah. And that's an inside job. That's the whole premise of self-awareness and engaging with this thing that everyone's experiencing and no one's talking about, fear. It's a practice of 1% gains, working it a little more, bringing more and more awareness. All of you that did the self-reflective practice, the vertical development practice, gained more insight. Maybe it seemed familiar, maybe it was new, but that ability to access and presence fear in this case, some of you pointed specifically, got you excited about the meeting you were stewing about, got you back in touch with some important considerations that were top of mind, whether it was about rest or your own decision-making power. Building that capacity consistently over time allows you to engage with the same, this is going to sound strange, with the same fears of the past more efficiently, and with new fears you encounter in the future with more self-acceptance and grace. So that's what vertical development points to in this instance, is we can hold more, we can create more from the world, be created more from the world, and engage with more complex circumstances. That fear is a totally normal response to have. So as change makers, if you're up to change, we speak from experience, as we said, fear is inevitable. It's how are we developing the capacity in ourselves and then over time with others and in communities to be in that conversation and to affect change together.
And if you are interested in disrupting the systems and institutions that are no longer working for us, and you want to create sustainable change, getting in touch with your fear or being devoted to a practice of self-awareness or investing in your vertical development is a disruption in and of itself. And so just the act of being more self-aware and including more of this stuff in and of itself is changing the system. It's changing the system of self and the system itself. So oftentimes we can come to workshops or invest in a development thing or come to a talk and be left with, I have so much work to do and I haven't done enough, and just being here is enough. Just actually journaling for 15 minutes a day is enough, but being devoted to that practice for the rest of your life is what's required in order to continue to really face the evolution of our lived experiences. So you are enough, you've done enough, and keep going, because as leaders, we really do need to make sure we're building our capacity over and over and over again to face what we're facing.
So we're going to take, some of you started to put questions in the Q&A. Thank you. We're going to respond to some of those, probably get your help with some of these as we start to look at them, because they're great. This is the first time we've had this conversation with the world. your engagement is helping us think through how we continue to bring conversations like these forward. So, okay, so Vic, you said earlier you'd mentioned that you were paying attention to the field around us. You'd love to hear more about what that is, what that means. Well, in our work, earlier was referenced the model that had vision and presence, power, and purpose in it. That is in relationship to the coactive model. We also have the coactive leadership model, which is 5 dimensions of leadership. The one, as Carey said earlier, that sits at the center is the inner leader, or the leader within. There's another dimension that's called the field leader, or leader in the field. And the field we hold is the energetic container experience, field's the word for it, that is being cultivated and being shaped by us all the time. So family systems have fields. When you go to a sporting or a music event, there's an energetic field you answer. Anytime you enter even a Zoom room or a physical meeting room, there's an energetic field that's there. Organizations have energetic fields. That's what we mean. And we're both contributing to those fields, shaping them by our presence, and we're being shaped by them. So that's Carey, anything that you'd add to that?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'd add that one of the things we assert is that leaders create fields to create change. And so what we mean by that is we pay attention to our impact. We think that impact lives in the field. And so we're paying attention to, have we landed what we intended to land? And that is, it's field awareness. It broadens our awareness from self and hard focus on others, other people, to the energies around us, and to determine if we're having the impact we're going for. So that's a lot of information that really requires a whole workshop around it. But I think the bottom line is to say that we include energetic field dynamics in leadership and think that they're really critical in order for leaders to navigate and create from the circumstances they're facing.
Yeah, Vic, you mentioned collective intelligence, and it's definitely in that domain.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Linus, if you're still here, you're going to have to help us, because we have talked about the BANI world, BANI, and that is a proposed evolution to the VUCA world. I believe it stands for, Linus, help us out, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible, something in that vein. And the idea behind that is the systems in the world are more brittle. The experience humans are in are some field of perpetual anxiousness. Nothing works in a linear way as it might have appeared to, and it's incomprehensible. We can't anticipate or necessarily understand. Think it's kind of cool, think it's relevant to a lot of people's experience. Would love other people's thoughts on how you're including that in your work and reference.
I think it's another way we're just trying to explain the experience we're having. And what I think, so that's what I think of it itself. What I'm more interested in is, how are we going to relate to that? How are we going to relate to whether it's volatile or nonlinear or fragile or complex? How are we going to decide as leaders to relate to that so that we can create from it? And so I think BANI is another great way, the great descriptors for the current experience. And yeah, I question in myself every day and want to talk to leaders all the time about how will we relate to that kind of world? And then therefore, what will we create?
Yeah, that's great, Carey. Just like the relationship to it. It says anonymous attendee, and then Emma, I'm going to put these two together. What impact does fear have people on environments? And what about the relationship between self and the wider ecosystem beyond and including humans or not? The first place I go for us to look is if you've got pets at home. I know our dog picks up on the energetic field and fear, if it's in the space, sort of quicker than some of the humans do. And so I would say it has a variety of impacts. It tends to incite the reactive part of ourself, territory of fight, flight, or freeze. Mine tends to be in the flight or freeze territory, personally. But again, as some of our colleagues, in related organizations, some of them say that leaders create the weather, which is really this idea of how I'm showing up, the energy I'm bringing into a space creates the weather. Now, if I'm bringing in fear or fearfulness, that'll have a marked impact, especially if you're in a role of privilege and authority. It's inevitable. So it's another way to think about how your own experience in your role and identity impacts a field. And that, what else would you say about it, Carey?
Well, I was just thinking, I'm going to sound like a broken record around how what matters more is how we relate to it. But I think there's as many impacts that fear have on people and environments as there are people and lived experiences. And so I think what's really important is for leaders to pay attention to the impact their fear is having on the environment, and to build the capacity to be with fear as it would show up in many different ways so that you can create from it. You can spot it, meet it, dance with it, create from it. So I love the question, because what I sense is behind it is an attempt to understand it so that you can engage with it. If we had a rigid definition of it, if we gave you a rigid definition of how it impacts people and environments, it would cut you off from a mostly infinite amount of experiences that will present itself for you to create from. So I think the focus on building the capacity to be with all the different expressions within yourself and others is the place to look.
Yeah.
I
see your ad. Yes, it does cut us off. I would say we're with you. It cuts us off from the larger ecosystem, disconnects the self from the larger ecosystem that we universally share. In some cases, the planet, in other cases, different domains of community. And that, if you're really curious, sort of look at how the natural world, fear is a part of the entire natural world. How do different species engage and create from, be with fear? It's the human experience is quite unique in that. So interesting insight and information, and then how do we account for that? And perhaps follow our own chain of curiosity into learning that we may get from leaders of non-human species, because there are all sorts that are quite miraculous.
Yeah.
I do want to say leaders bring the weather. That's not ours.
Yeah.
I'll attribute that to CRR Global, which is an organization that, again, we mentioned does team and systems coaching. Faith Fuller and Marita Friedhorn. So they're dear friends and allies in creating this quality of work in the world. So just want to keep it, use it, bring it forward, and check them out too.
Yeah. There's an awesome question from Lewis here about being a white male leader and what we would want specifically white male leaders to be and do in order to use their privilege to serve more effectively. Carlo, I'm going to invite you to go first, because you're such a beautiful model, and I know you're devoted to using your power, privilege, and identity to serve a more equitable world. And I have some things I'll share about it as well.
Yeah, thanks for the context and the question, Lewis.
Yeah.
Carey and I were up visiting with the founders of CTI 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that really dawned on me, sometimes why you're in a certain place in your life, and other times you find out a bit later. One of the reasons why I'm here at CTI in my identity is to serve Carey as a representation of feminine leadership first, and to really work the dynamic between the system of white male leader and how that's in service of a more marginalized identity in organizational leadership. So I'm learning a lot about, Carey and I are both, I'm learning a lot about how our relationship informs me and how I show up, and how it informs our entire organization, because they see us interacting. I hadn't thought a lot about identity prior to our engagement in our equity work 3 years ago, and now it's top of mind. What I would want leaders who share that identity to really be is be certain that systemic oppression exists. Don't be in the question of whether or not that exists and that there is marginalization going on in all parts of the world. Now, it looks different and it affects constituents different. We've talked to our regional partners around the world about this, but it's real. So be certain that it exists and then be curious about your place in that. What to do some of the emotional labor, have conversations, like for me to have conversations with people like me and my identity around notions of oppression and marginalization. I can represent it and influence it and impact it and shape it and do some of that work more effectively than others. It's more confronting. It's more impactful. It's requiring a level of depth and commitment that feels important.
That's great, Carlo. Yeah, and I'd underscore the part you said around identity. I think that they need to do identity work and understand and call to the forefront the awareness of their identity as white male, which is a privileged status. And I would encourage them to do some work on power dynamics and to demonstrate their awareness of power dynamics through the relationships, all of their relationships with self, other, and the systems that they are part of. I feel like white male leaders need to understand that they play a role in dismantling systemic oppression, not by changing who they are, but by identifying themselves as who they are. They have a unique role to play in meeting people who look or experience life the same way, in seeing more of the system and institutional level or lived experience that we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a beautiful question that I think our industry needs to, our whole world, but especially our industry needs to explore more. I really commend the work that you're doing there and that you asked the question, and know that it's a much deeper conversation.
I see some folks are having to go. Thank you so much
for coming.
Yes, Danielle, the idea of dismantling it, and in self first, how do I dismantle it with Carey and I in our organization, and then how does CTI doing that through its reach and influence? Okay, we got time for a couple more. So, Lisi, what are your own tools, psychological skills to react when you notice that you feel fear? Emotional eating is the most important first tool I have.
That's great. Well, to that point, what I'll offer is I lean into one of our legacy items, one of the legacies of CTI, which is that part of the creative process is to react, recover, and then learn. So I make room for my reaction. I've worked really hard over the years to try to suppress my reaction. I've just gotten better at knowing when and where to do it so that I can release the energy. So I think really the first thing is to allow for the reaction. In terms of the recovery process, for me personally these days, breath work has been really a phenomenal tool for me to ground and regulate, which are the two words that I'm pretty focused on. And I also find I'm an extrovert. And what I mean by that is I process and learn a lot through conversation. And so I will find another person or a group of people who can hold me in a specific way to recover. So those are some of the tools that I use in practices these days.
Double click on the breath work. Certainly, I've had a pretty consistent meditation and self-reflection morning practice. I have a ritual. It's about 45 minutes that was born out of attending our coactive leadership program, our 10-month experience. over a decade ago. That just builds my capacity and well of reserve so that when I hit fear, I don't get fully run over it, although that still happens. I think one of the practices that I am cultivating right now, which a number of you are pointing to versions of in the chat, is cultivating a deeper relationship with the ecological world. And so even last night, I got a little freaked out by a few things that were going on, and I will go walk in wild spaces because my experience is that those spaces, if you have access to them, have infinite capacity to hold a reactive human experience. And that's a field thing much than anything else. So, you know, in the pandemic, we heard often that people were getting back out into wild spaces, and those were very supportive healing experiences. Cultivating that as a practice and having wild places to go to, I find as being one of the things that helps hold fear in a larger perspective and disseminate some of the energy. And Carey, as she said, she's an extrovert, and sometimes she has to draw me out into a conversation around what's going on. And 99.5% of the time, I am always so grateful that we had it. So the third practice is have one or two allies in your life who can help you remember yourself in the midst of fear.
I noticed that in the other chat, there was a question from Pierre. If there's one thing you would love your coactive world workers to carry in the world from this presentation, what would it be? Oh, just one. I'm going to cheat. I'll say two things. It's less about the stuff we're facing and more about how we relate to it. So how do we transform the way we are relating to things? And how do we include the vertical development piece with the horizontal development piece? Like, I would want people to walk away with more will and desire to really be in the vertical development practices as much as the horizontal practices. And I would want people to be really thinking about, what is my relatedness to myself, to each other, to the systems, to these circumstances, and how do I transform that? Well, to me, the answer is the vertical piece. So those two things sort of go hand in hand. That's what I would want you to walk away with.
It's a great question. What would I add? I think I'll double click on what is our purpose, which is to transform the way the world relates. Insist that relationship is at the heart of the human experience, relationship to self, other, and system, and be with people in cultivating their capacity to generate relationships full of wholeness, responsibility, and love. That's our vision, a world alive with wholeness, responsibility, and love. So that's what coactive training is. It's a relationship technology. We apply it to coaching, we apply it to leadership, but fundamentally, I'm trying to see, there was one question that was here before around, does coactive apply to folks? Does the training apply to folks if they're not in a job or self-employed? Absolutely.
Yes.
It disrupted and transformed my relationship to my wife. It informs my relationship with my kids every day, sometimes in extremely challenging ways, for them as my teachers. And it has me typically sleep better at night. So relationship is ubiquitous. We're all in them. So that's what I would want y'all to take. Okay, we're coming close to the end. Wow, you're still so engaged. It's awesome.
I wonder, there's a question too called, I wonder too about the relationship between self and the wider ecosystem, beyond human, but connected to all humans. I'm gonna have to interpret, I think, and make a few assumptions about this question, Emma, because it's not totally clear to me what you're specifically asking. I think I still say, yes, there is a relationship between self and wider ecosystems beyond human and connected to all humans. I think beyond what we talked about system, Like we talked about 3 leader relationships. I hold that there's a 4th, which is less.
Hot off the press.
Yeah, and it's more of the beyond human connection. It's, some people call it God, some people call it life, some people call it the universe, but that's actually really at play. Some people call it collective consciousness, which is, I think, what you're after. And so, yeah, all 3 of these things are in relationship to each other. They are relationships in and of themselves, and they are related to each other. They're all weaving the unfolding of this thing we're experiencing as humans and as souls and as spirits. So I wonder about that too all the time. I think it's a beautiful contemplation and totally related to and one of many portals to discover our relatedness in the world and our relationship to the world. So I encourage you to keep wondering about it with yourself and other people.
Hi, Stephanie. You're saying it's the best decision you ever made, and me too. Great to see you in this way. Yeah. All right, well, we're going to go to close. Here's what will happen next. Thank you all so much for showing up, being in the experiment, contributing to the conversation, cultivating a sense of coactive community, which this is but a taste of. What will happen next is we'll send out an email with some follow-up session materials, the deck. We've got a couple of other treats that will come for saying thanks to watching the live stream or to coming to the session. And we'll use some of the information and enthusiasm for this to start to cultivate the next body of work that we'll be bringing to you in this kind of format. So anything else, Carey or team, that we've missed saying?
Nope. I think you covered it all. One of the reasons we did this was because as leaders ourselves and because of what we sense and see around us, leaders are needing a little bit of energy to re-engage with our world. It can be kind of an exhausting quest to be on changing our world. So we hope that this got you engaged or re-engaged with something. We think it's a valuable inquiry to hold. How will you re-engage and continue to recommit? And as you leave, beyond all the beautiful generosity of thank yous, if you want to leave how you're re-engaging or how this inspires you to re-engage, please do so. We'd love to know. And we hope you all travel well. Stay the course. The world needs change makers and leaders like you. We hope to engage with you in more ways than just a webinar in the future. Thank you for being here. Peace.
All right, signing up for the coactive leadership experience. Fantastic.
Yes! Yay.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, use emojis too. We love emojis. If you've got emojis to express your direction or where you're headed. Great. So please use this framework. Share it. See what it involves. Bring your coactive self to it and inspire more folks, as Pierre said, to become change makers.
Great.
All right. Okay.
High fives, Kelly.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone. Take care. Be well. Bye.
See you later, streamers.